Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host, as always, and I'm delighted to be joined this week on Extra with my travelling companion, as my colleague and I, alongside several other podders, were across for a lovely weekend across in Hamburg, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a moment. But welcome to this week's Extra, James Forrest.
Cammy, thank you very much for having me on. I'm sitting here in my office wearing my brand spanking new Hamburg top as we look ahead to a very important game for Rangers at the weekend. But yes, it was a lovely trip, great time had by all, and never a dull moment, and always happy to speak to you, of course.
Yeah, never a dull moment. Probably perfectly describes the game that we managed to watch, thanks to the London Bar in Hamburg, with a scintillating 4-3 win over Dundee on Saturday evening. James, I'm not going to lie, we were away in a stag do, and I don't know if there could have been enough drink in Germany that could have prepared me for that game, and just how poorly Rangers started, but how brilliantly Rangers finished.
Given the fact we went to a game and saw a 0-0 draw, it feels only right that this kind of made up for it a wee bit in terms of the number of goals that we saw. Thankfully, we were on the right side of it, and who would have thought that a guy who missed so many great opportunities prior would, of course, be the guy to end up getting the winning goal. But hey, that is so Rangers, and that is so Cyril Dessers. I think in many ways that game, that 90 minutes, was a microcosm of the season that we have had in a number of ways. Things need to be better. Things need to improve. We'll not get away with that against better levels of opposition. Something we might come to, but listen, I think where we're at in this season and how things have gone and where we know things will end up, particularly from a domestic point of view, it's just about getting through each game, hoping to get as good the results as we can, so that we're not off the back of that just feeling more and more annoyed at the team than we already have done this season, and hopefully get to the summer with more optimism than we have done in perhaps previous seasons, knowing that things really will hopefully start to change for the better. But as far as the game was concerned, the fact that we were able to find somewhere where we could watch it, and then possibly thinking we really regret the effort that we went to actually try and watch it. But what a way to win.
Yeah, it was. And we will talk about the upcoming game as we return to Ibrox on Saturday afternoon in just a moment as well. But one thing that's also been in the headlines across the course of the last couple of days, James, is the supposed amendment that is being discussed and already been shouted down, to be fair, is changes to the league where we're talking about revamping the top flight, or the SPFL are discussing it at the moment, where we'll change it from a 12-team to a 10-team premiership, in order to be able to rejig things. Now, I'm going to ask for your patience here as I tell you that it's actually the SPFL Board's competitions working group. Now, I have never heard of this group. I will hold my hands up in ignorance if it has been discussed previously. But the idea effectively looks at reducing it by 2, removing the split. However, in order for it to be ratified, it needs an 11 out of 12 vote. So you're very much in the ethos here of turkeys voting for Christmas. St Johnson chairman Adam Webb has already come out and pretty much poo-pooed the idea. I do not think it is going to get off of the table. The problem that you've got, I think, with our parochial nature within Scottish football is that, yes, we know that the top 2 clubs pretty much run the show. I have never been a fan of the split. I don't like the idea of being able to look at a completed league table for the season and see some teams in a lower position but on higher points than the ones above them. I still think that, if you've got a team that you need to go to and they are fighting for relegation or fighting for survival, rather than a team that has already solidified their place, I still think it makes it a little bit more exciting. But I understand for a financial reason why it's important for clubs to try and maintain it. I cannot see this getting off the ground whatsoever.
Think about why they're trying to make these amendments. This is in the same week that they also announced that teams at their request can request a postponement for a league game to help with kind of European qualifiers. So they're looking what other countries do. The ultimate goal is to reduce the number of games because there's an increase in the number of games that happen in European competitions. It's 8 games now rather than the 6 that we had before. So it's trying to find a way to reduce that. But at the same time, what they don't want to do is they don't want to reduce the number of big ticket games that they've got in the league. And let's be honest, that's the Old Firm games. They don't want to reduce that from 4 down to 2. It just doesn't make sense for them to do that. It's reducing what is obviously the standout. And you can absolutely turn around and say that it also reduces other derby games that people want to be able to see more of: Edinburgh derbies, Dundee derbies, etc. Right? But the big one is, of course, the one here in Glasgow. And how do you go about that? The 10-team league is what probably makes the most sense in terms of being able to achieve that, because you're not reducing the number of games drastically, but at the same time, you're still getting that guaranteed 4 games. But yeah, you're then in a position where every team is... You're facing every team 4 times over the course of a season. That does dilute the product somewhat as well in terms of some of the other games, some of the other places that you're consistently going to. The issue is we do play the same teams too often. We've seen it in recent years where we've, I think of that season a few years back where we played Kilmarnock like 7 times in a league season, with cup games, etc. as well. It's boring. You don't want to have that, but it's a really tricky balance to find between how do you solve that issue whilst at the same time making sure that you're still getting those games in. The other thing that I really hate about the split, on top of everything that you've said, which is absolutely right, is you're sort of in a sense of limbo on when you are free socially. You don't know whether you're going to be free to go do XYZ things in May because we need to wait for the fixtures to come out, and it's so very last minute. I find that really annoying. So if you have a way of having a league season where when each of those games are going to be over the course of a season, perfect. And then that is a lot better. It doesn't surprise me that the team that is currently looking set to be relegated is not keen on the idea of reducing the number of teams further. But I think that for me personally, if you're wanting to try and find the best of both worlds, whereby you're reducing the number of games, but also at the same time keeping those number of Old Firm games in there, there's 2 or 3 easy solutions to that. Solution 1 is you go with the 10-team league and you just accept that, okay, you're going to be facing a lot of these teams over again, but maybe if you expand the number of teams that potentially get relegated in the season, that perhaps doesn't have as big an issue. You keep it at 12, but again, you then have to have a split, but maybe you bring the split in early, maybe you bring it in after 2 rounds of games rather than 3. So then you're only playing those, and I hate to use the term, but I can't think of another term to use it, lesser teams. You only play them twice as opposed to 3 times, potentially 4. There is another very obvious alternative, is we are one of the few remaining countries in European football that have 2 main cup competitions on top of a league. If you're wanting to sort of reduce that workload in terms of the number of games that teams have, are we seriously saying that we must at all costs keep the League Cup? I know that's going to be a subject that, depending on what generation you come from, you're going to be less inclined by that idea. There's going to be Rangers fans listening who will remember that was certainly our competition, particularly in the 80s. But less and less countries are now going with a League Cup competition. They're just going with a league and a domestic cup. See, if you still want to use the League Cup somehow, make that a start of the season tournament between the winners of the league versus the runners-up or the cup winners. Something like that. If that's your main target, if that's your main goal, which I honestly think it is, reducing the number of games because of the increase in European games, whilst at the same time not losing out on the number of big games that we have in this league. I think they're the options. I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit to unpack there. I think your challenge with being able to say that, within a division, certain teams will only play each other for a fixed number of games. And I understand what you mean by lesser teams, but let's say just like lower table teams. And I do understand that the optic in this has changed, but I think that if you start to rule out selling old firm tickets, if you are a St Johnson or whomever, and you don't have one of these ridiculous restrictions in place, you could be cutting off your nose to spite your face if you're to vote for that, because some of these clubs depend on old firm sellouts, and in many occasions, as you and I have been standing next to each other, away fans outnumber the home fans, and so therefore they know that they'll sell these tickets. Other clubs have started to limit them. I still think it's a ridiculous idea, but we are where we are. The League Cup one is interesting because I know that Sky do have the option to be able to pick up the cup competitions. Obviously, as it stands, the Premier Sports agreement is in place. I don't think Sky will go for that because I think that they've realised that outside of the guaranteed 4 old firm games that you can get, you may get a sponsor's dream, which is an old firm final, and we've already had one this season. That's fantastic. But they're not certain, and all of a sudden you're committed to pay for some rounds of the competition before the semi-finals. You're guaranteed to get, semi-finals, which will come in and draw some degree of revenue, but probably not that much. And whenever you've looked at how it's fallen at the moment, even when you're, as I say, in the stages prior, the times for those games, if it's in the quarters, for example, pretty much rotate around when the old firm are playing because they know that that'll be the biggest draw. I do get the idea of being able to try and see if you can cut it down. I prefer the format at the moment where the League Cup is concluded in the first half of the season, because we'll remember there was times when we were still playing in that competition until March. And because, and this is purely with my blue tinted specs on, for me, that feels better to be able to get that competition out of the way, because if you're still in the latter stages of Europe, then you don't want to be competing in too many fronts, and Rangers have fallen foul of that in the past. One thing that's very interesting, though, James, is that the SPFL working group have said that they will look to amend domestic fixtures based on European games as of next season. That's not anything new. We've seen that in the continent plenty of times. Rangers have faced plenty of teams, especially in the very early stages of qualifiers, whose own domestic FA have paved the way, I suppose, for them to be able to get the best chance of success by moving their own domestic fixtures. I know that there is a counter argument of, well, you still want to be playing competitive games to get your presumably fairly newly assembled squad up to speed. But I think that this has been long overdue. And not only that, again, coming back to that point of if Rangers or Celtic, if needs be, were in the latter stages of European competition, which, let's face it, is really going to be the only 2 possible options in Scotland, then we absolutely should look at our fixture list and look to be able to make amends for it. Because as you and I are about to talk about with the Hibs game coming up, we have Hibs, Athletic at home, then Aberdeen at Pittodrie, and then away to Spain. It can rack up really quickly, and so if we are able to move those games in the future and have the option at least, then I think it definitely helps us.
I think the only way that you can do that is the other option that I've seen other people talk about, and that there is something to be said for it in terms of if you increase the league number to 16 and you reduce the number of league games to 30 as opposed to 38. If you do that, then it gives you a lot more space and a lot more wiggle room to say, teams can, for big European games, maybe not necessarily league stage, but knockout ties, if necessary, you can request the postponement. We'll find, there's more space within the calendar to, put that game in instead if need be. to allow you the time. Not every team is always going to do it, but having the option, having the ability to say, actually, this makes sense for us because we need a few guys back, we need a few guys ready for this, and that extra bit of time is really going to help whomever the team is. I think it's always something that they should have the ability to request. The reason why it's been less likely and has never really happened before is we have a stacked calendar where we must be up there in terms of nations that have the most domestic games, whether it be league, cup, etc., in a season. Think back to 21-22. We made the final of the League Cup, we made the final of the Scottish Cup, we made the final of the Europa League. I think was it Joe Aribo who played every single game for us that season and was playing international games on top of that too. And was he not hitting close to like 70 games played over the course of the season? That's not sustainable for a football. It just doesn't make sense for them to be able to do that and keep those levels up that whole time. That is the option. But then, of course, the big issue with that is you're then losing those extra games that, really at that point, TV companies are just not going to pay the same amount as what they do now. And what we get now is nowhere near what we should be getting for the size of clubs in the league too, mainly. But there's other clubs in there as well that deserve more credit than what they get at the moment as a whole. So yeah, I welcome the fact that they're looking at it because I don't believe the structure that's in place right now makes sense. I think there's a few options on the table. I think they have said that on top of the idea of looking at 10 team, they'll look at keeping it the same. They'll look at 14. They'll look at 16. My one ask is just don't make it overly complicated. Don't do the thing that you get in Belgium where you play like 30 games and then you split the points in half and you have group stages. Just simplify it. It's a league. You just play. Everyone plays the same number of games. The league position is reflective of how good you are as a team in that season. Simplify it. Don't overcomplicate it. And I think in that sense, that's why going to 10 might make more sense than potential other options. But listen, at the end of the day, I know that there's going to be people that disagree with that, and that's absolutely fine. There's a lot of different opinions that will swing about. It's a subject that's been in place for years, and the reason why is I think Scottish football fans as a whole want something different, want something better. Does it guarantee a better product on the park? No, there's other things you need to do, other investments that need to take place in order for that to happen. But from a fan experience point of view, playing the same number of teams over and over again, not having that absolute set guarantee of this is what the calendar is going to be for the full season and that's it. Yeah, let's look at what the options are. Let's see what happens. But ultimately, it comes down to votes, and I don't think unless the proposal is to increase the league, I just don't think it will get voted through because I think there'll be enough teams looking at that and saying it's not in our best interest.
No, I agree. And this is where, again, if you look around, other leagues across other countries, actually their championship or first division below the top division, in some cases they're incredibly competitive, but there's also a really high standard of football within there as well. And it can be difficult at the beginning of the season to be able to predict who could win it. And if that was to happen in Scotland, then okay, grand. But yeah, I just can't see as to how that falls back into that. I think it would make a greater gulf from the championship back into the top flight. So it will be interesting to see what other ideas come out of the pot. So we will brace ourselves for the next genius idea that comes out from the SPFL. Let's bring it back home though, James, as Rangers return to Ibrox on Saturday afternoon to take on Hibs. Second versus third. I'm hoping that we'll be able to put on a strong show at Ibrox, which is not something that Barry Ferguson has been able to say too much. However, he has been able to get us out of very sticky situations, I think it's fair to say. To quote the manager, his team is definitely showing character. However, I I'm very concerned that right now it feels like we can't keep Waynes out of a close, where we just need to be able to tighten things up at the back and stop conceding silly goals. And whilst I think that the manager and his coaching staff have definitely got work to do there, one thing that I have to be able to try and call out as well is we need to cut out the individual and sloppy mistakes that we're seeing. And one of them for sure that needs a bit of focus is Jack Butland.
Absolutely. It's weird we're conceding a lot more goals despite going to a back three. And obviously having the wing backs in there as well. And it's just because we're just not very good at the back at all. We don't have enough solid defenders to, come out of a game with a clean sheet, and you put Jack Butland in there as well. He's just right off form. And he's, we're getting to the point where he's been more off form than on form for us, over his time here, which is a real shame. It doesn't mean that he cannot rekindle that, but he has to work at it. He has to, he shouldn't feel like he will always be guaranteed a spot in the starting lineup. No player should feel like that. And I think at the start of the season, our manager at the time did suggest that he was the only undroppable player. But don't go in with that mindset. You have to work hard to keep that place, deserve that place. The issue is the drop off in terms of natural quality from where Jack Butland is to the alternative in terms of Liam Kelly. It is a drop off, and Liam Kelly is a great guy to have in the dressing room. He's someone that if he's asked to come in and do a job, he will do it. We have seen that this season, but we have also seen that he isn't, that there isn't the same level of overall quality, and he is also prone to mistakes and that as well. So we're a team that most oppositions in Scotland would look at right now and say, if we can get at them, then we can get something. Dundee showed that, but they just dropped off toward the end. And when we really kicked up a gear and were pushing to get those goals and got there in the end, that's not sustainable. If we play exactly the same way on Saturday as we did at Dundee, Hibs are more likely to punish us. Hibs have earned the right for us to be able to have to say we need to be at our best in order to get a result. We can't just rely on one or two individual moments, because Hibs are playing well. They've worked this out in terms of how to get the best out of the sum of their parts. It's a really tricky fixture, especially for a side whose home form of late has been frankly awful. Was it Ross County, the last home game that we won? And that feels absolutely ages ago. There needs to be a turnaround. We need to see a number of players show that level of character that Barry Ferguson is talking about when it comes to being at Ibrox in front of fans who are going there expecting a victory, despite the poor run of form, despite the lapses in concentration, despite the clear lack of quality compared to what it is that we would expect. We're at the point now where a lot of players, if they want to stay here beyond the summer, if they want to be a part of what could well be a very exciting future for this club, then they need to start showing that they've got the ability to do it in a game like this. It will be a very tough game, and it needs players to be sharp and switched on in order to get something, because it again has the potential to go wrong if we just don't have that mentality.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you go back to the last time we played Hibs at Easter Road, just at the turn of the year, and we were very much in the driving seat, 2-0 up within pretty much the first quarter of the hour. And Hibs were able to get it back to 2-2. We took the lead again through Hamza Gaman, getting a hat-trick, and then some calamitous defending allowed Rocky Bashiri to finish off in the game at 3-3. And this is probably where, again, to come back to where the manager's mentioned it a number of times, character can be fine if it gets you out of trouble. What it also needs to be able to do is not allow you to become complacent. And so even if we do start strongly against Hibs, and I hope we do, because I feel any team looking at us coming to Ibrox at the moment will say, as long as you can keep yourselves in the game, if you can get ahead, then fantastic. But if you can get yourself in the game up to, I would say, about 20, 25 minutes, then I think Ibrox will start to make itself known that it's not happy. So there is obviously that side of the coin. The other side being that if you do go ahead, you're playing against a team that's been able to dig out results against you previously, and in some cases pretty recently. And Hibs have had a decent run of form. There's absolutely no doubt around it. League tables don't lie. And this is where what I really just want to be able to see on Saturday is just the focus, just being able to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to make some of these silly mistakes. And that applies to everybody, no matter where you're playing on the park, by the way, because there shouldn't be any reason as to why we have any degree of trepidation about coming into this game, because those wins mean something. I know that by and large the league is done and dusted, and it will be officially done and dusted, in a matter of only a few weeks. But there was still, as you say, a chance for these players to prove to their teammates, to the club, and probably most importantly to the fans, that they do have a future at Ibrox beyond this summer. So therefore, it's now within their gift to make sure that they can tighten up where those mistakes are, because, and we won't get too far ahead of ourselves, but if we skip forward to a week on Thursday, those mistakes, if we're going to continue to make them, will absolutely get punished. So I see Saturday now as that opportunity to get these players into that mindset of just be calculated, by all means take risks, but whatever you do, don't give the ball away needlessly, especially not to teams that believe that they can punish you.
Saturday probably concerns me more than Thursday does. And it's so weird to say that, but I think so much of where our issues lie, it is a mentality thing. Because see, when it comes to Thursday, it's a European quarter final against a huge club from La Liga. That's a game that every one of those players are going to relish. Do you have that same attitude? Do you have that same mentality for Saturday's game? You really should. See, if you don't, Rangers isn't the club for you. You have to have that intensity, I think, within yourself to want to perform just as well in a game like this as you would do on Thursday night. The best Rangers teams, the best Rangers players are able to do both. And maybe this part of it is down to there's a lack of expectation for Thursday. I think most Rangers fans going into this game are realistic of the fact that this is again another step up in quality of European opposition, particularly at a knockout stage, and it could well be. Really hope it's not, but it could well be where the road ends. But that lack of pressure that they'll maybe feel almost allows that freedom to kind of play the way that they want to play. But again, if that's what's required, then again, this club is not for you, because you need to be able to perform just as well when that expectation is on, no matter who the opposition is. So I think it's something that most Rangers fans suspect with a number of these players, not every one of them, but with a number, potentially most of them, that it's so much down to the mentality of how they treat these games compared to the European ones. And that's where there's a misalignment in terms of what the players feel they can do and what we expect from them in those scenarios. And it's not good enough to put in an absolute stonking performance on Thursday if you've not put in that same level of effort on the Saturday. You haven't done enough over the course of the season. You haven't earned the right to be able to do that. So, we need to see that attitude on Saturday for starters, and then we move on to Thursday thereafter.
I think a big part of that could encapsulate the entire course of the season, if I'm being honest, because Thursday nights have absolutely been the exception. And unfortunately, across the course of the season, we just haven't been good enough consistently to be able to mount a league campaign, and certainly not one that's been able to propel us into the latter stages of the Scottish Cup either. James, I'm keen to get your thoughts on how the manager looks to be able to approach this with the European games in mind. Laura Clark and I spoke on Extra last week about whether or not we would approach the Dundee Hibs Aberdeen games as, are these the tester games, if you will, where you might be able to trial a few different options, thinking ahead to the Bilbao games. I don't think that was what the intention was on Saturday at Dens Park for sure. But at home, with back-to-back home games, and as you say, he knows that these will be tough tests. Is he going to have one eye on Thursday in terms of how he looks to set up? There's players who are missing, who I think we really need back. So Czerny, ideally, we haven't had an injury update on him yet because we're expecting to get that, I believe, in Friday's press conference. But it's not just that. It's the players who I think for me have shown that they've got a chance. And I look at Ridvan Yilmaz for this because I thought he was dreadful on Saturday in Dundee. Whether or not these players can feature, because it could be a case of play the players that you know you're likely to pick on Thursday to get them some proper game time, or theoretically just try and give them a little bit of a rest or allow them to do a little bit of additional recovery time, because Thursday does become all important now.
Play the strongest team. Play the strongest team on Saturday. And if you're doing that with a view to Thursday as well, great. But this is the game that matters the most right now. It's been, the home form has not been good enough. We need to get back to winning at home. And that has to start on Saturday. So I think the shape that we're going with in terms of the idea of what we're trying to do on the park, I don't think that's going to change now for the rest of the season. I think if it was ever going to change, we'd have probably seen that on the previous Saturday. But I think this is something that Barry Ferguson and the coaching staff feel, for who's available, for what options are there. This is the route to go down for the rest of the season. That's the impression that I'm getting from them. But I wouldn't be saying that guys like Sterling or Suter or Tavernier or Raskin or Diamande, I don't think you turn around and rest them. See, if you're 3 or 4-0 up, 20 minutes to go, make changes, make substitutions, no bother there, because you've done the work that you need to do to get the result at that point. Absolutely fine. But I come back to it. We as a team haven't earned the right to be able to say, we'll kind of do a bit of rotation here with Thursday in mind. It's just not, it to me doesn't make sense. And I also don't think that we have a large enough squad in terms of players that have consistently coming over the course of the season to be able to do much in the way of changes. So I think the lineup, bar one or two options, and I think the left back position is certainly one of them, that will be interesting to see the decision that's made there. I think the team is pretty much set. I think we know what we're going to go with. I think we know what to expect in terms of how the lineup will look.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, again, it was something which I think the previous manager failed to do consistently, which was play the strongest team in order to ideally put the game to bed. And then if you need to, you can start to use your rotation around a little bit as well within the game to give some of those players some downtime as well. But yeah, it will be interesting to see as to how Barry Ferguson approaches it. That will do us for this week on Extra. David will be back with the flagship on Monday to cover the game against Hibs on Saturday. I hope if you are going along, you're going to really enjoy yourselves. It would be lovely to be able to get a home win. So I'm going to hope with all my heart and soul that is exactly what David will be talking about on Monday. If you can't wait until Monday, and you'd love to get loads more Rangers content at your fingertips, including pre- and post-match press conference updates as well directly from Ibrox on Saturday, please feel free to join us over on patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers, our executive producers. Thank you to you all for listening. And most importantly, thank you very much to James for coming on today.
Pleasure, Cammy. Thanks for having me on. Good to speak to you again. And yes, here is hoping that Saturday will be a much happier trip to Ibrox than what a few of the previous trips have been.
Absolutely. We'll be back with you on Monday, folks. Have a brilliant weekend and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.